Carol Massar, a little bit of a turnaround from what we saw the last 3 days where this market was trying to move higher. A big downdraft today for a wide variety of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think investors were kind of hopeful over the last 3 days. But having said that, once again, I think it's tariffs. Again, the uncertainty, maybe new tariffs, different levels of tariffs. We're waiting maybe, I guess, at 4 o'clock. Supposedly some news when it comes to auto tariffs. And we've seen certainly various names in the auto space moving around on that news today.
Does seem the president is running late, so we're not going to get those comments until after 4 o'clock. But still, the auto sector getting hit as a result of uncertainty there, Scarlet.
Yeah, you look at the economic data, and on the whole, durable goods looked pretty good. It beat analyst estimates. But when you break out and just look at core capital goods, which backs out like aerospace, that unexpectedly declined. So really, it's more proof, and this time it's hard data showing that companies are holding off on their capex.
Guys, I'm also going to go to the fact that this is really still about big tech, because you look at the equal weighted index, that's pretty much flat. I appreciate that small caps are also getting hit, but it's the Mag 7 that's really dragging everything down. That's not really a tariff story. That's an AI infrastructure risk story at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's really evidenced by the fact not only what you said with the equal weight only down 0.2%, but Dow Transport's up about 0.6%, as we are seeing a bid come in to, well, old school stocks, FedEx, Union Pacific, trucking companies as well. Still, we do have red across the screen for the primary indices here on this Wednesday afternoon. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to close lower by more than 100 points, or roughly about 0.3%. The S&P 500, the benchmark index, down more than 60 points, or about 1.1%. The Nasdaq indices each down about 2%. The composite down 2%. The Nasdaq 100 down about 1.8. The biggest drag, of course, the Mag 7, NVIDIA, leading that whole cohort down. The Russell 2000 also getting dragged down by financials and energy stocks, down about 1% on the day.
Yeah, and having just a quick check on the S&P 500, kind of an even split, guys. 266 names in the index, gaining ground today, Scarlet, 235 to the downside.
Yeah, but because of the heavy weight of tech and tech-related companies, you're seeing that big drop in the index. You have infotech, communication services, and consumer discretionary, which basically holds all the Mag 7 names down by at least 1.5%. The sectors that are green, all the smaller sectors, consumer staples, utilities, energy, real estate investment trusts, they tend to be more defensive as well.
All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers. GameStop on that list, stock up more than 11% here at the close. This company, of course, we talked about it after the close yesterday. The meme stock frenzy that we saw back with retail traders really coming off of COVID and so on. Its company's board saying it approved a plan to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. Company did also report fourth quarter net sales that tumbled 28% year over year. Just a reminder that the fundamental business, certainly not so interesting, but nonetheless interesting for investors in today's session. Dollar Tree up more than 9% at its highs today, finishing the day with a gain of just shy of 3% in the trade. The news today, company saying it's going to sell Family Dollar, the chain, for about $1 billion to Brigade Capital Management and Massar Capital Management for a decade after buying the business. I remember when this news and the consolidation of these two big players in the sector. So that certainly coming out in today's session. And then Cintas Corporation, its number one gainer in the S&P, was top two in the NASDAQ 100. It's an $83 billion market cap company, workplace uniform provider. Did come out with its full year earnings per share guidance that beat the average analyst estimate. And so investors, maybe not an exciting company, but investors certainly found it exciting in today's session.
All right, let me just jump in because we did have results out of Petco, and the ticker is my favorite, WOOF, W-O-O-F. Fourth quarter net sales meeting analyst estimates, $1.55 billion. The consensus was for just over that amount, $1.56 billion. And in terms of other numbers, the net loss, the bottom line, was $13.8 million, wider than what was anticipated, which was $10.3 million. The stock moving a little bit higher in after hours trade by about 1.2%.
All right, keeping an eye on that stock. I'm also keeping an eye on stocks that moved lower in today's session. NVIDIA is the one to talk about because that just dragged everything lower, whether we're talking about the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100, or the NASDAQ Composite. It was the biggest contributor to the downside today, down 6%. Got hit for a couple of reasons. It started the day lower after this report from the Financial Times late yesterday that said NVIDIA products could be at risk from energy efficiency rules for the use of advanced chips that would prevent Chinese companies from buying NVIDIA's processors. Then we saw shares of companies tied to AI today fall as a result of growing concern around spending for AI data centers after TD Cowen came out with another note that said Microsoft has walked away from new data center projects in the US and Europe given, quote, oversupply relative to its current demand forecast. NVIDIA down 6% today. GameStop was up. GM, General Motors, was down 3.1%. I'm watching shares of all the U.S. automakers, in fact. President Trump has been set to announce details on tariffs. That was set for 4 p.m. We'll bring you those comments as soon as we do get them. He was set to speak from the Oval Office, though. Analysts have estimated that new tariffs could add thousands of dollars to new car prices. And finally, shares of Vita Coco fell today by 11%. It's the coconut water company. This after Ningi Research issued a short report on the company. They argue that 2024 sales growth underperformed category performance, and Vita Coco's market share, quote, has been falling since early 2023. Vita Coco, for its part, out with the statement says there are numerous inaccuracies and mischaracterizations in the short report. Vita Coco also reaffirmed its disclosure from February that it expects to lose some regions with certain private label retailers during 2025 due to inventory constraints. Shares falling today by about 11%.
All right, I'm going to go to the bonds, guys, for a second. What's so interesting is you had the sell-off in the equity market and you had a sell-off in the bond market. You would think that with the risk-off mode that you'd see a move in the dollar and in bonds to the upside, but we didn't get that. Yields higher on the back end by about 4 basis points. We did get a 5-year auction today. It was not as great as the 2-year. We get 7-year tomorrow as well. But for now, the bonds not getting that safe haven bid that maybe the dollar didn't get, guys.
All right, guys, we talk about a market where a lot of people are sort of looking for a direction or at least looking for a little bit more clarity. And I guess it raises the questions as to sort of what moves the needle next. Are we going to wait for that announcement from Trump and the tariffs? Do we wait for the next batch of economic data, or do we wait for earnings season, which quite frankly is only, about 3.5 weeks away?
Yeah, I kind of can't wait for the commentary with earnings. I hate to say I'm ready for another earnings season, but I kind of am. But
I am too, yeah.
Right, to kind of get some clarity of what's going on in C-suites. We keep bringing in, leaders, people who are managing money. We had a guest today that, new money put to work, and they're like, we're not going to put it anywhere. We're going to kind of keep it in cash or cash-like investments because we're just not quite sure where things are going right now, and they want things to settle down.
I think April 2nd is the next catalyst here. That's what the president calls Liberation Day. We're supposed to get more details on tariffs. Potentially we'll get more today. I think there's just been so much waiting and sitting back and saying, wait a second, okay, what are these tariffs going to look like? If you're the CFO of a company and you want to deploy money to for a CapEx project, for example, you're going to wait to see, how much copper is going to cost, how much steel and aluminum is going to cost, what's going to happen when it comes to the consumer if things get more expensive. I think there's a lot of uncertainty there, and hopefully we'll get more clarity April 2nd.
Well, the tricky part, too, is once we do get clarity, it's pretty easy for the president to remove the tariffs or change the tariffs after they've been announced. And we've seen several instances of something happening, and then a couple of days later, it's rolled back, or parts of it are rolled back as well. So that just leaves all these companies paralyzed.
That's the art of the deal, Scarlett.
That's the art of the deal. Right.
Are you familiar with it?
I think there's a book by that name.
It's negotiation.
Which is why, though, I find so interesting that the Mag 7 got hit so hard today on totally different reasons, right? Like we had the Microsoft and TD Cowen note. You had Tesla getting a downgrade to hold. You had NVIDIA and those energy rules you were talking about, Tim, and Google. You have an analyst saying that potentially the youngsters are going to go to ChatGPT and not Google for search. Like these are individual issues that have nothing to do at the end of the day with tariffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's creating so much uncertainty. These are much more structural, much more long-term, and don't really have historical precedent in a lot of ways. I do want to just go back real quickly to one of the stocks that you were talking about, Tim, and that was GameStop, which had a phenomenal day today. But here's the rinse and repeat that we've seen so many times with this, a share offering, $1.3 billion in a private placement, and that now has the shares down in after-hours trade by about 7%. Why do people do this to themselves?
I don't know. Maybe because it's a Bitcoin mining company now or something?
Is that what it is?
It buys Bitcoin, right? Maybe
It'll
that's
still be a proxy for Bitcoin.
I don't know. Maybe that's a thing. You do that.
I don't know what kind of company it is anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy. All right, guys, that's a wrap. We'll see. I'll wait for some more news out of the White House and potentially on those auto tariffs. That is a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage on radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. I know Alix is heading out. Scarlett and Romaine continuing there on Bloomberg Television, and Tim and I continuing right here on Business Week.